Hey everybody, this is Perch. Here's a viewer question, and I'm not sure I'm going to answer this, but here we go. Let's give it a shot. I picked this one to do while I was driving. I think that's going to help in this weird way, but let's see. Let's see how it goes. The question is, hey Perch, it's a short question. Has any comic book ever gotten you to cry? Basically, given you so much emotion that it brought you to tears. There's been a few comic books that have done this to me. Wondering about you. Thanks. That is a personal question. And this is the internet, so a bunch of people are going to do the internet tough guy kind of routine of like, so soy. But the reality is, everybody has cried. I always these people are like, crying for women and people who aren't men, and um, it's a silly concept. I mean, first of all, punch anybody hard enough, they're going to cry. That's how it's going to go. Or you learn how to take a punch, I guess. I don't know. This isn't the channel to tell you that there's nothing wrong with crying. I mean, people do it, especially if there's sad emotion wells up in them and everything else. People cry. Of course they do. When you're a parent and you've got kids, your kids are going to cry. And if you stand there and go, that's what a, stop being a soy child. I mean, you're not a good parent. Of course. Now, in terms of comic books, I don't think so. I don't believe there's a comic book that's brought me to tears. There's situations in comic books that have brought me to tears. Um, God, what was the launch? I can't remember now. It was one of the Image launches, and I was having just a terrible, terrible day, terrible week, and I was like nothing was going right and everything else. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. So the comic, there was a point when the comics were delivered to me, and I had this shop, and there was kind of a breezeway kind of between areas, and sometimes they would come and they would put the comics down outside my shop, and then they would leave them there. It was it was a trusting community, and one of the other, they would basically go and get one of the other shop owners to sign for it. And I had to tell them, please don't. I didn't really have a theft issue, but I didn't want the comics just sitting out there. And eventually I would just drive. I would have them held at either the shipping location or at the airport, and I would go up and get them, put them in the back of the car, and then take them back. It was easier because I could never get people to do it properly. So I remember, it wasn't Wildcats. It may have been Cyberforce. They came, and I had like the comics hadn't arrived. I'm starving. I'm like, I'm gonna just run across to this little place that was like a hot dog place. It was actually a little fast food, walk-in place, and it sold hot dogs. And I don't think they even have hot dog only places, at least not in the West Coast anymore. I was in Colorado at the time, and sure enough, in the 5 minutes I'd gone to get the hot dog, the boxes had arrived and been put out in front of the shop. They'd found somebody, even though I'd asked the other store owners, please don't sign for this stuff. Somebody had signed for it, was sitting out there. And the tragedy was that it was wet, like it had rained. And so even though the breezeway is protected, there was little puddles, and they had just plopped a box down in a puddle. And I was having like the worst time. I'd broken up with somebody. It was painful. I was the breakup, but I never have enjoyed breaking up with anybody. It's always just an annoying. I'm a lot younger, and just a bunch of stuff. There was a bunch of work to do, and I was behind, and it was like a lot of emotions all up. And I see those boxes sitting there, and I see it sitting in the box, in this box sitting in a puddle. And I see the water is starting to seep up. You see, the darker cardboard is starting to seep up on the box. And again, 5 minutes, maybe exaggeration. It couldn't have been 10 minutes though. And so I quickly, I remember, I don't know what happened to the hot dog I was carrying. I may have just dropped it. And then I go and I open up the shop. I unlock it. I quickly throw open the door and I just quickly just take the box and shove it inside the shop, trying to get down to the box that is sitting in the water. And I get to that one and I pick it up, and the bottom of the box opens up. Like it's soaked, the cardboard gotten weak, and the bottom just opens up, and the comic books fall out of the bottom of it. And I'm pretty sure it was Cyberforce, and that was the big seller. That was one that was going to, make the rent that week. and it falls out the bottom. And clearly, not only is it, I haven't made it into the shop yet, so now it's falling out of this wet box onto the wet ground, this wet pavement. And I just remember looking at it and bringing the remains of the box in and kind of shoving the comics in. And I didn't have any help that day. It was just me. It was by myself. It was late. And I remember just sitting there and taking the comics out, and tears flowed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. It was frustration. It was exhaustion. It was like all these things that kind of well up and do that. And that I remember that very clearly, of just this, fuck moment. Absolutely. And you picked yourself up. You yelled it. That was Capital City at the time, and just painful. By the way, there's about half of you right now, I think, listening to this, going, "Oh my God, I felt that in my groin." It's like the sick feeling of that moment, and half of you are like, "Yeah, that guy's soy." But I remember just feeling that kind of overwhelming exhaustion. But in terms of an actual comic, which was the question, no, I don't think so. Although I'm being honest with you here. I wish there was. So this is one of those cases where I'm not a crier kind of person. The tears, it's hard for the tears to flow. Generally, I think it's been very rare that I've cried about something, unless you go way back when I was a tiny kid. But the things that would always do it is if literally, like, I did a lot of world traveling, so I'd been up for 2 days. The exhaustion and the fatigue and just the kind of the overwhelming sense of things. But I would call it almost venting rather than crying. That's what it felt like. And I've always wanted to be the kind of person who'd like pick up a comic, and it was so moving, so emotional, so powerful that I'd feel that kind of, that emotion of a death in comics that hit me really hard. But I haven't had that. I know that I have a friend who cried at the last issue of Saga before it went on hiatus because of what happened there. I don't know. I talked about it at one point in a video, and then somebody got all mad for spoilers, and it's like, it's been 3 years, dude. I mean, where's the line being drawn here? I remember hearing about somebody who cried about. And they talked about how they cried when when the Flash died in Crisis, and I remember reading that issue and being like, "This is not this kind of a cheap death, if you will." But I just, I've always hoped comics would elicit that kind of reaction, and they don't. I think it's your personality type. I think some people get caught up and moved by things like that, and some people don't. And I'm in the don't camp. I just don't. I've never had that reaction. And I think that if I was to have that reaction, that would be one damn good comic. I mean, that would be the comic you remember for being really, really powerful. I'd like comics to be that way. I'd like for comics to have that kind of emotional response in people, not just tears. I mean, but actual joy and anger and frustration and all the kind of the really strong emotions. I think if a piece of art can move you, whether it's a comic, a movie, a song, whatever it happens to be, if it can move you to those kinds of emotions, then that's powerful, powerful work there that's able to do that. With me, I like I said, it's been exhaustion, it's been memories. You have those things where you go somewhere and you kind of you realize that something you won't get it back. Kind of these. You go and you look at like you had a favorite store when you were growing up, and you go back to visit it and you find it's been torn down, and you stand there and you look at kind of the empty hole and it's gone. Those are the kinds of things that choke me up. This idea that life it moves on from you. That's the kind of stuff that I think brings out the emotion in me. Comics, I just haven't done that. And maybe it's how you read comics. I tend to read comics pretty quickly. I tend to, and I don't want to, but in my head, I'm remembering kind of all the comics that have done this bit before. I'm very quick to recognize kind of repetition and tricks in the comic that are going to tell the same story. I'm just trying to think of a comic where I might have felt, gotten close to kind of that emotion, but not really. There's been comics I've really enjoyed. I did really enjoy House of X Powers of 10. I thought that was well done, and I thought there was some really cool stuff in there. A really great reading comic. I liked The Last God a lot. I like the Kill Lock. I'm thinking, recent things. I love. There's lots of comics I love, but I mean, like even the stuff I've just really loved, like the 5 years later of the Legion. There are definitely some pull the heartstrings moments in that comic, but not enough to get kind of an emotional response. I think some people talked about how they cried with the. I want to say it was either Chip Zdarsky or Tom Taylor. I'm not sure which. They did the episode of, the issue of Spider-Man, I think, where kid was dying and Spider-Man kind of in a make-a-wish type of situation. I remember a lot of people talking about how that one got to them. But to me, it always felt a little bit manipulative, just in how it was done. It just felt like I don't know. It felt like it was intentional what they were doing. So I guess the question comes out to you. I'm hoping that some of you in the comments will have some better answers, and you don't have to take it all the way to crying because people express emotions in different ways. But I'll change the question a little bit and say, what's the comic book you've read that you felt a lot of emotion about, that you felt, a rush of anger, and when I say anger, I don't mean like you read, America Chavez and she's, it's such a lousy comic, you get angry about it. I'm not talking about that kind of emotion. I mean, something where the story worked as intended and it pulled you along. What's a comic like that for you? Whether it's sadness or joy or these kinds of things. What are the comics that bring out that kind of emotion? Or are you like me? Is it just like you don't feel that kind of emotion for a comic? It's not that kind of experience for me. And given that I truly do love comics, and love is of course an emotion, and it's a powerful one. I truly feel a lot of love for this industry and what it puts out. I know that's probably the reason why I both am irritated by and other people are irritated by me when they go off and on about this industry needs to burn down and the wreck of this industry. I mean, it's also something that I dearly love. Comics, obviously not the stupid shit people get up to and the dumb stuff we talk about all the time, but overall, I think there's something above all that. I definitely love that. But comics that you loved, comics that you felt real anger about, real grief about, whether it brought you to tears or not, what are some of those for you? I'll toss it back to you. Hopefully, in the question, some of you can do a much better job than I have done. But let me know. And good question, tough question. That's a really tough question. I'm surprised I got through the video. Thanks for listening.